They can see my lips moving, but I can't hear anything. I assume okay, good, right on. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, well, welcome everybody. My name is Malcolm Saunders, and oh, what a journey here. I base my timeline of the store off of my children. So I know for sure that we've been in this location 3 years now because my son turns 3 August 5th, and we were moving as my wife was pregnant. So there's pictures of her like moving boxes and directing people around as we moved in. And prior to that, we were down the street for 10 years. And prior to that, I was out of my basement. So it has been a journey. And I want to welcome you, whether you are brand new, first person here today, first time, or you've been coming since day one. And I'm going to give away some prizes. And during this session, we'll have some samples as well. And it's really an opportunity. I'm game for anything. Something specific that you want to get into or chat about. I have some ideas that we'll get into and talk about, but it's kind of what's new, what's been going on here behind the scenes. And maybe the thing that I'm most excited about is sharing with you the things I've been creating. So my passion, my mission in life is to help you find and learn how to craft your own food and medicine. And that's my hobby. That's what I do. I'm out in the hills all the time. I'm in the kitchen all the time. And a lot of what's coming out are things that I've been making and enjoying. So most especially, maybe we should start with the free gift here. I love herbal honeys. We'll talk about herbal honeys, how do you prepare them, things you can add to them. And so has everyone got their gift yet of the mock orange syrup? No? Yeah, there we are. If you don't, come and grab one. All right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. Okay, we'll get you one more until. Okay. All right. Yeah.
That's good. Delicious.
So the mock orange, is anybody familiar with the plant? Do you have it in your backyard or you've seen it growing? Yeah. So, right. Right. Huge. Yeah, they get very large, and the aroma is just absolutely overwhelming. And you'll know it's the right plant when you see it. It's white flowers and it smells like orange blossom. Hence the name mock orange. So neroli is the kind of the aromatherapy essential oil term. Come on in. You're welcome to join us. And so there are a few different techniques for capturing, harnessing the essence of plants. Donna, if you wouldn't mind, could you grab maybe 5 or 6 of the mock orange free samples from the till? Yeah. Welcome everybody, come on in. And there's a few things that I've been doing. So maybe let's start with the herbal honeys because it's absolutely one of my favorites. So we all know that we can make tea, right? Tea is a great way to kind of prepare herbs, to extract the essence of herbs, and that's using water. Tinctures, which we'll talk about, uses a base of alcohol. And, just to kind of throw it in context, like tincture, I would bet that every single person in here, even growing up, had a herbal tincture in their household. You might not have thought of it as a herbal tincture, but that vanilla extract actually is a herbal tincture. So it's taking a plant material, being vanilla, putting it into some sort of alcohol. Done? Yeah, that's right. And then the alcohol is able to pull and extract those properties. And that technically is a herbal tincture. We don't think of it like that, but that's exactly what it is. So I've gotten into the art of craft of doing this. So there's water extraction, alcohol extraction. You can do oil extracts, things like pine resin. You've been harvesting that. The poplar buds from poplar trees. It's called the balm of Gilead. I've been harvesting that, extracting it in oil, turning it into salves. But maybe my favorite extraction method is honey extracts to create herbal honeys. Now, I've created a big long list now of all the different herbal honeys I've created. We're going to sample 2 of them right now, and the other one is a key component of this mock orange that you're trying. So I've got some rose petal honey, and I have some spruce tip honey. In and of itself, it's a revelation. It's absolutely amazing. All right, so I want to acknowledge Donna here. She's here to help out, and she's going to be, passing around the samples because we have lots for you to taste and enjoy and ask questions anytime. Now, let's start with the rose honey. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah.
So the honey does the same thing as the alcohol does, extracts?
Yeah, it's true. So the honey acts as a medium to basically pull and extract the flavor properties, the aromatic properties, and of course with that, what is flavor an indication of? The aroma, indication of the medicine, right? The chemical compounds of these different plants. So the best thing is maybe I can just pour some into that container, then you give everyone a little spoon, and then they can kind of dip in and have a taste. Yeah. All right. Yeah, this is really good question. So what type of honey? So when using this method, I prefer to use just a wildflower honey. Wildflower honeys tend to be the most medicinal. We can get very specific source honeys. You can get blueberry honey and buckwheat honey and manuka honey and all these different types. And of course, that depends on the flower source that the bees are going to gather the nectar. And there can be benefits. We've heard about the benefit of manuka honey. Generally, I find though that a lot of flavored honeys, because you need such a wide area, specific area honeys, you're just getting, blueberry is good, orange blossom is good, but bees, when they're just kind of left to a natural area and they're gathering nectar from wildflowers, it tends to be more medicinal because they're going to things like dandelion, they're going to things like clover, and those medicinal properties are brought through in the honey. That's partly what makes honey so good, is that floral essence that comes through. And to give you an example, conversely, there are psychoactive honeys, meaning that bees have gone to plants that are particularly psychoactive. Like there's one in Nepal, they call the mad honey. Yeah, and it's psychoactive because it's from a psychoactive plant. Just like you can have poisonous honeys that are gathered from poisonous plants. So I like wildflower because it represents a whole mixture, the ecosystem of medicinal plants and flowers brought back into the honey. Oh, really good question. So how do you know? Well, you have to talk to the bees first to say, okay, no. Right? How do we control that? So part of it is area. So bees have a certain radius that they can go out. I believe it's about a mile, like 2 kilometers, as far as they'll fly from the hive to gather nectar. And then it's also seasonality, right? So that it's very easy to get a dandelion honey because early in the spring, most of what's flowering is just dandelions. So some of these specific varietals, let's say blueberry, and why I'm not the biggest fan of them, is it's often, kind of an entire like monocrop of just blueberries. And so the bees are placed there, and then okay, they're only going to blueberries versus that diversity. So sometimes it's seasonality, but a lot of the time it's just geography and where can they go and how far they can go. Oh, okay. So most concerned about the poisonous one. So you would have to very specifically, intentionally place them in an area where you have a lot of poisonous flowers. So it's extremely rare. So even the mad honey, psychedelic honey from Nepal, that's very, 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 very specific. Yeah, all honeys, they may have trace amounts of nectar gathered from poisonous plants, but it's not going to affect you in a negative way in honey. Yeah, absolutely. So I do prefer, for the herbal honeys, I do prefer something light and neutral. Meaning, if you had buckwheat honey, right, it's super dark, it's super dank, it has its own flavor. You know, rose would kind of get lost in that, right? Because rose is so delicate, it's super floral. And if you had this really like dark, rich, you know, earthy honey or a fruity honey, the rose would be in there, but not as much as like clover or wildflower, which is more light and delicate. So what did you think of that?
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I invite you, whether it's roses, we were talking about, she said, in collecting rose petals and not sure what quite to do with them. So I love, yes, you can make tea, you can make tinctures, but when it comes to rose and many of these other plants that we'll talk about, herbal honeys are an amazing extractive medium. Now, this one, the rose this year, I did, it was probably a gallon and a half of honey. In total, but to begin with, you can just have a jar that starts off empty, and let's say you've only got a small handful. I mean, this is one of the things about collecting wild rose is, yes, not in my season that I have the time and focus to go, I'm just going to go wild rose picking. And if I spend 5 hours, then maybe I could get a nice little basket of them. But it was literally like 20 minutes here, and we finished the plant walk, I can go pick some roses, you know, an hour here. And it was over several weeks. And so I kept adding more rose petals to the jar.
Do you dry the petals first?
Good question. So they can be used dried or fresh. Yeah, and I think fresh is best. That being said, dried works perfectly well because as you can smell, those roses, just like you could smell a dried mint, it's still very aromatic. If you can get it fresh, why not? Right? I think it's just going to be just slightly better. And then you put any type of plant material into a jar and you just make sure it's covered with honey. And then you let that sit for anywhere from 5 to 25 days. And all that you're doing each day is you just flip it over, and then it becomes like this really fun floral lava lamp where, you know, everything kind of oops up to the top. And then the next day you tip it back over. Because what will happen is all those, as we can see with the spruce tips, they just want to come to the surface, right? And yeah, these are spruce tips. Well, this will be our next sample. And
Well, when you're picking the flowers, you're not picking every petal.
yeah, really good question. So there are nuances when you're into each different flower or plant. With roses, yeah, exactly. I'm not picking the whole thing. I want to let it become pollinated. So maybe I might just pick of the 5 that a rose would have. I might pick 3 or 4 most of the time. Sometimes I'm picking the whole thing. It just depends.
If the rose petals, if you touch the rose and the petals are just going to fall off.
That's right.
It's orange.
Yeah, it's true. So it depends on the stage that the rose is at. Sometimes, you know, they've already been pollinated and they're literally just dropping to the ground.
Are they still okay?
Yeah, so I would rather grab the whole thing at that time versus, yeah.
Because if it's not pollinated, it won't be able to grow a rose.
Well, good question. So where do I source my honey? A number of different places. I'm very aware of keeping away from industrial agriculture. People are like, why do you have Alberta honey? For the longest time, we never had Alberta honey because I didn't feel confident in a source that was away from industrial agriculture. Most notably, genetically modified canola, right? The bees, they can go to that field too, and they're going to bring that essence of that plant back. So we've been working with a guy for years, and I visited him, been to his place. He's a 3rd generation beekeeper on Vancouver Island that lives in a house that's the shape of a hexagon. I mean, this guy is like, he's committed. He loves bees. And so we've been working with him for years. And Vancouver Island, like, it's a great environment, lots of blackberry, dandelion, lots of great wildflowers. And then we also recently have started working with eastern slopes. And so they're eastern slopes of the Rockies, again, farther away from industrial agriculture. So I feel really good about their honey as well. And then every once in a while, we'll bring in something like new and exotic. We've got like a Brazilian jungle honey, you know, like just straight from the Amazon. We brought in the Nepalese mad honey, psychoactive honey for a while. You missed that one, yeah.
When you are taking the wild petals in the wild, you know that the They have mixed
Oh,
breed.
yes, really good question.
When it's
So,
out in the wild.
yeah, especially when you're wild foraging, that
Yeah.
becomes a real concern. How do you know it hasn't been sprayed? So this is,
Chemtrails being what, something I think about.
Yeah.
Spray.
Yeah.
Nearby farms that
so we've
maybe
got,
it's an area.
totally, yeah. So we've got all the influences of nearby farms. We have chemtrails, we have, spot spraying,
Yes.
and I guess the ultimate answer is none of us can escape that.
Okay.
And it's also about getting to know the area. So of course, I would never pick something next to a railroad track because of they heavily spray. Have you ever noticed that on how many feet either side of a railroad track, like nothing lives? Yeah, plus you got the creosote contamination potential. So it's about knowing the area, and yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah, but then ultimately at the end of the day, there's
Yeah.
not.
There's no such thing.
We don't live in a bubble. Yeah. So we just do the best that we can. And, it's that idea of like hormetic stress, a little bit of poison, a little bit of toxin, a little bit of exercise, right? Even like that's what helps us grow and become more robust. So yeah, we just do the best we can. And yeah, for me, it's about knowing the area. And you would think, wild areas in BC and Alberta, you actually have to be careful because it's standard forestry practice to use glyphosate to kill a lot of the underbrush and the softwood trees because they want the hardwood, and they're trying to create a monoculture out of diverse ecosystem. It's one of the saddest things. Yeah. Anyways, this is what we're up against. I was reading an article by Charles Eisenstein. I don't know if you know him, great author. He's written a number of books and he's quite a prolific and a really nice, beautiful, deep thinker. And he was reflecting on the fact that he'd only seen one monarch butterfly this year. And he hadn't seen any what he called lightning bugs, like glow bugs. And he just, this was hitting him as it did me, like deep and heavy in the heart. We all feel that. And, he says, and he's like, I could continue with the rest of the article to tell you all the things that we should do. We should, try and ban pesticides, and we should create, safe ecosystems and da-da-da-da-da. And he says, you know what? The biggest, most important thing is we need to recognize and honor the sacredness of the monarch, honor the sacredness of the lightning bug, because only when we truly care and see it as sacred and, this interdependent relationship will we then move from a good space. Government regulation is not going to do it. No. Do we want more government regulation? No. So I think that's the space. That's the way forward, and that's what I feel that this path of being on the journey with food nutrition that has really connected me to my food and to the environment. Right? Like I think. Denny Manzer, he talks about a lot too, this kind of journey that we all go on. I don't know if you're the same as me, but I was born and raised standard American diet, right? Like junk food. My mother's Scottish, bless her heart, like prepared the best food that she knew how for us, things that she had learned from her family, like a lot of meat and potatoes. But she really, in her loving heart, encouraged my brother and I, like, because that's what we wanted. We wanted Fruit Loops, we wanted Lucky Charms, we wanted pizza pops, we wanted all that stuff. And that's how I was raised. And it wasn't until I shifted my diet, that first transition from, packaged foods and junk foods to whole foods, right? You start to kind of prepare things yourself. But then it becomes this journey and there's all these nuances. And really, I think where the goods are at is, wild foods. And maybe the next would be things that are close to their wild genetic, like heirloom, right? And locally grown, sourced. And as much as I'm into local, I'm sure you might agree, I'm also into what I call the exotics and the erotics. I don't know anybody that's actually willing to give up coffee or black pepper or cinnamon. I mean, this is the spice of life. And I think that has a place for us, for each of us in our life. But yet if we can get the majority of our calories, especially the fresh ones, from our local environment, and you define, I'm not saying it has to be 100 miles or, it could be within Canada or North America. We're all doing the best that we can. And when we start down that path, I have seen and experienced that we become more deeply connected, to where our food comes from. We see these places and spaces as sacred. And it's more nourishing in that way too.
Yeah, if you want kids to eat the vegetables, get them to grow them.
Right, good point, Donna.
They
So
get
if you
so
want
excited
kids to
about
eat vegetables, you know, get them to grow them. Good point. Or get them to pick them, right? So we lead plant walks all the time. And sometimes we'll start, you know, what's your earliest memory of a wild food, right? And most oftentimes, like, oh, being out with my grandparents, picking berries, right? It's just such a deep impression that can have on us. Yeah. All right, so we're talking herbal honeys. Yeah, are we kind of good, clear on making out how delicious that is? Like just the diversity. So exact same honey, 2 different plants extracted in honey. Who doesn't love honey, right? Yeah.
We pick the spruce buds.
Oh, so I picked the spruce tips back in June. Yeah, and here's the thing: this will perfectly preserve forever, right? So it's not only a medium of extraction, but it's a medium of preservation as well. So.
Stage of the buds on the tree.
Okay, so what stage? The spruce tips, they're just emerging, that bright green tip that you'll see on the end of the spruce trees. So you're just picking those. You can eat them. They're delicious. They taste kind of lemony. You can do all kinds of stuff with them. And oh, what's the benefit of spruce tips? Great question. They're very high vitamin C content, and in past, you know, they were relied on as a source of vitamin C, especially in a time when maybe fresher foods weren't available. It wasn't that season. So they can be dried, they can be fermented, they can be preserved in that way. Spruce also has a very kind of cleansing effect, purifying, right? And we have this colloquial term to like spruce something up. We want to spruce it up. Spruce has that. While we're on the topic, let's try some more spruce goodness. Let's
Good
go.
for respiratory too.
It's really good for the respiratory system. Yeah, the colds and flus. Similar to pine, it contains what's known as shikimic acid, which is the key ingredient in a modern pharmaceutical called Tamiflu. #1 over the counter, maybe it's prescription, I don't know. I've never bought it. You know, kind of anti-flu medication is shikimic acid. It used to be sourced from star anise, but now we're primarily, I'm not sure where we're getting it, but star anise used to be the natural source because it had the highest amount, 70% shikimic acid, whereas spruce and pine are about 3.5%. So yeah, and you know, nature provides. This is available year-round for us to utilize as, you know, nature's cold and flu remedy. So here's a spruce syrup tincture. It's a mix of the spruce tips tincture, which we're going to talk about, hydrosol, which we'll talk about. So this is kind of a fun thing that I've been doing. It's creating things.
Explain how they take
Yeah, for the spruce syrup, you're welcome to, you can just kind of squirt on everyone's. Yeah. Some of the tinctures, because of the high alcohol content, is completely sterile, like antimicrobial. So even if you were to kind of lick it and then put it back in the bottle, not that I'm saying you should, but you never know. There's always that one. Anyways, Donna's going to help us out with that.
So we talked about spruce tips.
Oh, good question. So Catherine's asking, would you eat, could you, should you?
I'm gonna say yes.
Eat the spruce tips? And yeah, absolutely. So typically I'll strain out the plant matter. And this one already had been strained, but I did want to leave some of them in there just for show. And then, yeah, you can either pop them into tea, you can eat them, you can dehydrate them. So really what yeah, I've been working with the kitchen because the chefs here are amazing. We have such a great team right now, and they're so inspired, especially, well, I don't want to say especially, both of them. Well, there's 3. We have even Fanny who's in here part-time, but one of them, Alex, he's worked in all the top fancy restaurants around town, and he's kind of done with the scene, you know, like the typical kind of restaurant scene. So he came here and he's just loving it. And he's an incredible chef, and he's very inspired by local wild foods. So, you know, this spruce tip soda was kind of a collaboration of my inspiration and his innovation of like, okay, how do we create that? And so it's a combination of using, you know, the spruce infused sweeteners like a honey or a sugar. And then what he's been doing is then once it's extracted, then he'll dry it, and then he can add, you know, spruce back. Plus, we're adding in the spruce hydrosols as well. So, yeah, really good
How do
flavors.
you know what's the level of concentration?
Oh, how do you know? Yeah, really good question. So the level of concentration, the medicinal properties. So just as an example, right, that is maybe, just for sake, I'll say it's about 10% of the honey jar. Again, this was just roses added back in. When I first did it, I packed the entire jar full of petals, poured the honey, and then they kind of like condensed, squished down to about half. And the ultimate way of knowing would be a lab analysis, but I'm going to say not the ultimate way. I was going to say, I mean, sure, okay, we can get the chemical analysis and but just from tasting it, right? If you only added that many rose petals and you tried the honey, you'd be like, I kind of sort of taste it. But if you add in enough, yeah, I'm really big on intuitive chefing, right? As much as I love nutrition science, as much as I love being a nerd about herbs, I'm really so much more about tasting, right? And using our own kind of experiential knowledge and wisdom, right? So, there's a lot of research around forest bathing, which is really cool, right? Like, the positive therapeutic effects of being in the forest. But do we need science to tell us that, right? Like, you feel it. You go in a forest, you're like, you ground, you relax, your blood pressure goes down, just everything about it, you feel uplifted. Maybe on that basis, we can kind of get into, let's bring the forest in here. We've got a number of different hydrosols that we can try out. Let's do cedar. Yeah, cedar's a good one. All right, let's bring the forest in, the internal forest bathing, bring it into the room. So this is cedar hydrosol, and this kind of relates to the syrups that I've been adding in. So this here behind me is what's called an copper alembic. And this is a bit of a fancy tool used by some herbalists to get a particular extraction from plants. And this is using steam as a way to distill the essence of plants. So if you've ever had an essential oil, I would almost guarantee you that, 9.5 times out of 10, that piece of equipment, something like this, or at least the result it produces, was used to create that essential oil. So it's a steam distillation, meaning this chamber is hollow, and you can fill this with water, you bring it to a boil, and as it boils and the steam evaporates, it passes through this column, and as it does, it pulls what we could call the spirit, or the essence of the plant, in particular the essential oils, comes up, it begins to go down, and then as it passes through here, still in the pipe, there's a coil underneath, and then it comes out the bottom, and it drips that condensate. So this is the cooling chamber, taking the steam, bringing it back into liquid, and then you get what's called a hydrosol solution, water solution, of which you have both water-soluble and oil-soluble compounds from that plant material. So the oil-soluble compounds are the essential oils, and then usually that sits on top, and they would skim and extract that off. There's your essential oils. Hydrosols sometimes are sold as a byproduct of that, but since I've been starting doing it myself, I leave it all together as one solution, and I think that's more of a true pure hydrosol. So hence, the cedar, you can spray that around, you can smell that, right? It brings the forest in. Some of these hydrosols can be used just aromatically. This one here is one that I did recently. I was in the Badlands out near Drumheller, and I was noticing all the different types of sage and wormwood, artemisia. So I picked 3 different types of artemisia and then did steam distillation, and this is the result. So we called it clear because I'm sure as you're aware, if you've heard of people using sage, like a sage smudge sticks. So this is like a sage smudge stick, but without the smoke. Yeah, it's more of like kind of a freshening, enlivening variety of that. You could, some of these hydrosols you can absolutely consume internally. Some of them you can't. So the cedar is one that's recommended not to consume internally because it contains an essential oil called fujone, which can be toxic. You have to consume a lot. That being said, it's just kind of the disclaimer. In a hydrosol, there's no way of kind of regulating that dose and how much you might be consuming or not. But you know, there's rose hydrosol. I did lilac, did mint, did pine, did spruce. All of those are completely edible, and I'll show you some recipes in the mocktail class where I'm going to work with the hydrosols and put them in. Now, coming back to our mock orange syrup. So it was a combination of the mock orange flowers extracted in honey, done as a hydrosol, and done as a tincture, so in alcohol. And then those three combined. Now, the rose syrup was just a combination of rose honey and rose tincture, and then that combined. We have to pass this one. This is like amazing. If you like the rose honey, you'll love this one even more, I think. Oh, I love rose. I know it's not everyone's favorite, but man, it's just like, it opens the heart, it melts the knees. It's just like,
Certainly it has the highest vibration of level.
It does, right? It's that. You guys are going to be buzzing by the end of this little short session here. All right, we got lots of good folks joining online. Welcome, everybody. I can see you. Type any questions if anything comes up. Apologize, you're missing the samples. But hey, we're talking about better here. We just can't quite get that through the virtual. But if you're around, hopefully you'll be able to come down. Okay. So maybe to kind of sum it up before we get into some more samples and we'll do some giveaways, that's the direction, you know, that Light Cellar is taking, is more made in-house, things that myself or the team has personally like wildcrafted, small batch, right? Like a lot of the stuff that we're trying, wormwood, hydrosol, the mock orange, the rose, these types of things. I mean, I'm doing white pine tinctures. There's an abundance of white pine. I won't run out of that unless it's just I'm in between going and harvesting and making it. But there's some things that are, you know, so precious, so seasonal that it's really just a moment. And isn't that special, right? Like, I don't think everything should be available, you know, all the time anyways. Yeah, and I know that seems very counter to how one should do business, but you know, it's like, it feels more authentic, it feels more human that is the approach than, you know, this mass produced. And, you know, in maybe almost 15 years, we started this conversation talking about kind of the journey from, actually, it wasn't just my basement, it was my my in-laws' basement that we started Light Cellar out of. Yeah, ever since that, well, maybe not in those early days, but once we had the location down the street for 10 years, I mean, literally, I could almost guarantee you, every month I would get the request for a second location. Or you got a franchise, you know, like you should have one on every corner in every city. You know what my answer's always been? No. Hey, I don't want that for my life. But most importantly, that's not what this is about, right? So we did, after like several years, we did try a second location because, you know, I'll tell you, second location doesn't mean, oh, just automatically double the revenue. It means double the headache, double the work, double the, you know, without quite the return. So anyways, we thought, okay, I'll just try this out. And we did a little pop-up down in Inglewood outside of Bike Grocer. Some of you, I'm sure, went there. Maybe you enjoyed it. But after about a year and a half, we're like, no, because you know what the best feedback we got? That we would say like, oh, your Bike location, it's really convenient. That's it. Right? No one comes here and says, wow, it's really convenient. Right? What are some of the adjectives that come up for you, the descriptors? Small place. Yeah, it's just awesome. Yeah. We just weren't getting that down there. And you know what? The staff hated it too, because just the nature of it, they were by themselves in another grocery store. It just wasn't the same vibe or atmosphere. It really wasn't. Yeah. So it was just kind of recognizing that. And I already kind of knew it, but we tried it, and yeah, so I'm happy with as you are. So, okay, let's do some giveaways. And those of you online, you can definitely get involved and type in your responses. So I've got lots of gifts to give away, things that are new that I've been making in house. This is a Schisandra berry tincture. That's the beauty of that one. Yeah, I decided to kind of keep a couple of Schisandra berries in the bottle. So that will be up for a gift. We have a blue lotus tincture. Yeah, blue lotus, kind of made famous by the Egyptians. Yeah, it's a very dreamy herb. You know, some people will actually smoke it. They put it in their pipe and they smoke it. Other people will make teas out of it. Tincture, again, using that medium of alcohol. Yeah, so it's good before bed, kind of creates lucid dreaming. That is a nice one. We've got a kava tincture. I'll talk about the root beer syrup in the later end of the class. And then we have some recipe books here. So who is here for the first time ever? Yeah, okay, great. You guys each get a book. So we want to pass the elixir life pass that way. Okay, Jennifer says, fingers crossed for a lilac hydrosol. So just a comment online. So this is an example of, you know, lilac. I made a nice small batch. This one's, we got to pass this around. Have a spray, but that one's done. That's it. I only got so many. It's over with.
This lady is asking what Schisandra is.
Oh, okay, Schisandra. This is it's a Chinese tonic herb. It's actually a berry. It's a fruit that contains all 5 flavors, right? And we know, like I mentioned before, flavor is an indication of nutrients and medicine, right? What do we say about bitter, right? Bitter medicine. It's an indication of certain compounds. It can be very tonifying for the liver. They help stimulate digestion. This one is primarily sour, but it does actually contain all 5 flavors. So let's pass this around so you can give it a try. So this one is stronger in alcohol. So you can either have Donna put it on your spoon, we can put it on the back of her hand, or we can kind of shoot it in the mouth. It's a wild ride, Schisandra. It works on all organs and all body systems.
Skin.
And amazing for skin. Yeah, for glow. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
It's good for liver.
Good for liver. Good for detoxification. Yeah.
That's a good punch.
I would say one of the best ways to take Schisandra is kind of, every once in a while this happened to me, middle of the afternoon, you kind of go like the kind of energy lull, that bit of a hump, right? Now pop that in your mouth. That'll wake you up. Isn't it nice though? Yeah.
Love it. I like the Schisandra goji berry.
Oh, Schisandra goji. Yeah. It's kind of a classic Chinese formula. And in Chinese herbal medicine, they personify some of these herbs. So Schisandra is considered the queen.
Yeah.
And goji is considered like a princess. Turned into a princess.
I like that.
Okay. Oh, really good question. Now, the question was, do we know anybody that grows these herbs? And I think this is the new frontier, you know, for as a business opportunity, but also most importantly, just for us as kind of consumers to get our hands on these herbs. So a lot of them, like Schisandra, they come from the Orient. They come from China, which I must say, you know, China can have the absolute best in the world, and they can have the absolute worst in the world. It's kind of like America too. It's like the best of the worst. Like it's the whole spectrum. So I'm not anti-China in terms of sourcing herbs, but you have to make sure it's good quality. But one of the neat things is this particular Schisandra was being grown in Massachusetts by a Chinese medicine doctor who saw this opportunity. This is like the same ecozone. So he was growing the Schisandra. There's lots of places in Calgary, people's gardens, as well as places throughout town where you can find goji berries growing. The rhodiola, you know, kind of famed in Tibet, again, Chinese herbal medicine. There's actually wild varieties of rhodiola that grow here in Alberta, but there was an Alberta Rhodiola Growers Association that started growing it here in Alberta. So that's who we source our rhodiola from. And yeah, really, really, really good, high quality. So Now I know the answer to the first question. So we had who was new in the room, so they got a prize. Who has been with Light Cellar and known me the longest?
When you were on the stroll.
Well, okay, so I've got three prizes for that. I know one of them goes to Donna, because honestly, I think Donna actually might win that.
22 years.
All right, so if you want, you get to pick one of those.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
So we got pine pollen, Berry, or the blue lotus. Okay, so even before, when I was doing Light Cellar out of my in-laws' basements, I would go do classes like this at Planet Organic, and Donna would come help me. Yeah, even before I had a storefront. So here she is. And I think you might be a close second. So you get Shazandra or Pine Pollen.
Oh my
You
gosh.
get to choose.
Oh my, that would be
Phenomenal. They're both valuable.
Yeah. And then without picking favorites or really knowing the answer, just Catherine caught my eye. So I don't want to say it. We're just going to give you the prize.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
You're welcome.
And everybody else will get their mock orange syrup. So if you don't have your mock orange syrup, just come on up and grab one of those once we're done. We're just going to break in just a couple minutes. And, any questions coming up for anybody online? Anything coming up for you guys? I didn't know what the session was going to be about, by the way. I just knew that we'd have stuff to talk about. Maybe we should talk about chocolate. So we have two. So we've got our medicinal mushroom chocolate that we've been producing for a number of years. And you're going to see some new interesting seasonal chocolates show up. This one here is called Get Yoked, which might be, I know there's a derogatory like connotation to that, but there's also like a positive. So it was like, we were weighing it out. It's not the best name for this. Anyways, it means to like
your
get
heart
on,
on.
right? It's like the hard on. You gotta
Really
just
something to pronounce that.
pronounce it very well. Okay, so this might be a world's first in the fact that we actually added egg yolks to chocolate. Yeah, so the idea of this one is like unbelievably creamy. So it's A2 type milk as a powder, plus colostrum, plus brown butter, plus egg yolks, incredibly rich and creamy. Not vegan or plant-based by any stretch of the word. And then we have a chamomile white chocolate. So this is a herbal chocolate, white chocolate, of course, to allow the chamomile flowers that we literally just ground down and put into the bar for that to come through. So there's an example of two seasonal chocolates for you to taste. The other thing we've taken on recently is creating natto. I think ferments are one of the foundations of human health. The four food groups are plants, animals, bacteria, and fungi. And that bacterial ferment is really key. And natto is something that is unique in the sense that it contains the highest amount of vitamin K, K2 in particular, as well as nattokinase. So this is natto, which is a fermented soybean preparation, fermented by a bacteria. You take soybeans, you put what's called Bacillus subtilis, ferments these soybeans into something very, I don't want to say delicious because it is an acquired taste. Once you acquire the taste of it, you're like, wow, this is delicious. But very, very nutritious. So highest amount of vitamin K2 and high amounts of nattokinase, which is an enzyme that works on the cardiovascular system. Very beneficial. So we took the natto, we dried it into a powder, and then we took nutritional yeast that hadn't been synthetically fortified with vitamins. We put them together, and it creates the ultimate like umami, cheesy snack. It's like Emmenthal powder almost, you know? So we'll pass that around and you can have a little taste, but very, very, very nutrient dense from some ferments. And the natural nutritional yeast is also a byproduct fermentation. So we'll get Donna to sample that out. Maybe a couple other things that are noteworthy, changing up all the sodas, you know, incorporating, you know, wild herbs, foods. And then we've got these fun, beautiful little bottles and what we're calling our potions. So there's a number of different flavors. So, but we've come to the end of this session and I want to make sure we're kind of on time, on the hour each hour. So our next presentation will be Vivian Safaris.